Hello everybody, welcome to this video on how to make a shirt. This is part one of several videos that I'll be making. I've been asked to make a video by a few of the people who follow me because they want a better idea of the process that I go through when I make a shirt. The pattern I'm using is the shirt from The Gentleman's Wardrobe. This is a great book to invest in. It's got really great diagrams explaining the processes for each step in making various garments. And I find it's a really good resource to refer back to when making garments from other patterns as well. So very well worth investing in. It's Gentleman's Wardrobe by Vanessa Mooncie. So I've already cut out the fabric for the pattern. This fabric I bought from John Lewis a couple of Christmases ago. The intention was to make some Christmas table runners, but I found some other fabric that I preferred. It sat in my stash for a couple of years and I've decided now that it's worth making a shirt out of. Because I only bought a limited supply of each fabric, it will actually be in two different fabrics, half and half, part in this white and silver combination and part in this blue and silver combination. I hope you like how it turns out. If you're following this tutorial whilst referring back to the book and the pattern, this video will cover off parts 1 to 4, which is assembling the yoke to the front and back of the shirt. One thing I would say at this point in time is that the method used in the book is for a top stitch seam, but I'll be using the Burrito method. As I generally split the shirt making process over a number of days, I only mark up the pattern sections with tailor's chalk as I get to each section, so I leave the fabric attached to the pattern pieces, the paper, until I'm ready to use them. So I'm just finishing up marking up the pattern pieces. Now my preferred method is to stick a pin through the mark on the pattern and then use that as the basis for drawing on with my chalk pencil the mark on the fabric. So that's now all done and we're ready to start sewing. Okay, so the first bit of stitching we're going to do is we're going to put a stay stitch here and here around all the neck pieces. So this is basically just to prevent there being any stretch whilst you're working on the material, so hopefully it will make fitting the collar more straightforward. So that's our line of stay stitching done. Okay, now this will sit, one thing to be clear, this will sit within the seam allowance. So your seam allowance on this is 1.5 centimetres, so this is within the seam allowance. So I've used white here obviously so you can see it a little bit clearer hopefully, but it doesn't actually matter what colour you use because that will disappear within the seam allowance. So now we're actually going to start to construct the garment. So you have two yoke pieces, one which will go on the inside and one which will go on the outside, which will then hide your seam here. So we start by pinning the yoke onto the back panel and then we'll sew that on. Because I'm working with two different coloured fabrics, I'm going to go with the white on the inside of the yoke and the blue on the outside. So the right side of the white piece, the inside yoke, will pin to the wrong side of the back, and the right side of the outside yoke will pin to the right side of the back piece, like so. Okay, so I'm just going to pin that together and then I'll sew it and I'll show you how that looks. Okay, so I've now pinned the two yoke panels to the back of the shirt. And just to clarify as well, you've got two notches at either side to help you line up all the pieces, and then there is a chalk dot in the middle of the back. So you use those to help you line up before you pin. Now if you want, you could then do a basting stitch to hold that all together before you put it through the sewing machine. I tend to just pin and then sew. So I'm now going to sew the 1.5 centimetre seam allowance along here. Okay, so we've now attached with a seam, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, the two pieces of the yoke to the front to the back of the shirt. So you've got the blue on the right side and you've got the white on the inside. And as you can see, that then encloses that seam here when the garment is finished. So the next step will be to start attaching the two front pieces to the yoke. But first one, I'm going to cut this seam here. If I can just open that up. Yeah, so I'm going to cut this seam down to like 1/4 inch, just to neat it up. And then we're going to start by attaching the front pieces to the inside yoke panel. So I'm just going to tidy this up and iron it, and then I'll come back and show you how to attach those. Okay, so you can see I've trimmed this seam down and ironed it, and I've ironed the back piece of the yoke up. So we're now going to attach the front pieces to the back. So we're going to start with the wrong side, the wrong side of the back yoke. So this is the bit that will be inside the shirt that won't be seen. And we've got our two front pieces, one in blue and one in white. So we are going to attach them to the right side of the inside yoke to the wrong side of the front panels of the shirt. And hopefully it will all make sense as we go along. So again, you've got a notch to help you line up the two pieces. So we are going to pin those like so. Okay. And we're going to do the same with the other side. So again, we want the right side of the front, and we're going to pin the wrong side of the front to the right side of the yoke. So again, we have our notch here to help us line everything up. So we pin there. Okay, so I'm now going to do seam here and seam here, and I'll come back. Okay, so we've now attached the front pieces to the inside yoke. So as you can see, that is the right side of the inside yoke with the wrong side of the front piece attached to it, and they're the 1.5 centimetre seam. The same on the other side, probably not as clear because it's all the same colour. But again, the wrong side is attached to the right side. And if I can quickly show you, you should get a good idea now of how that's going to look. So, like so. So that's currently how we are. So this is the left front, this is the right front, and then we have the back with the yoke. Okay, so in the book you will do a top stitch seam according to the pattern. So the way that will work is that you would iron over the seam allowance here and here, and then you'll pin it onto here, and you'll do a top stitch seam just to enclose the seam. But what we're going to do today is the burrito method. So what you want to do is you want to attach the right side of this seam to the right side of the front. Now as you can see, you can't do that like that, so we have to roll up the shirt. So we'll roll up the front, and I tend to do this one side at a time, otherwise it gets a bit complicated. So that's rolled up, okay, and we'll just stick a pin in the end just to stop it unraveling too much. Do the same one that side, and then we're going to do this side the same thing. We're going to roll this up as well. It doesn't have to be super neat, it just needs to be small enough so it fits within this yoke piece, and hopefully that will make more sense as we go along. So we'll just stick a pin in there as well, and then we need to do the same with the back. Again, we're going to roll this all the way up like so. We don't have to be too elegant about it. So now we have all of these bits rolled up, which enables us to get to the seam here and to the seam here. Okay, so what we're going to do, again using our notches on our fabric, is we're going to pin this all together. Now what you want to make sure you do is you don't want to ruche the front pieces at all, and you don't want to get any of this fabric caught in where you're going to be seaming the garment. So just make sure it's all out the way. Some of you may find it easier to pin and then do a quick line of basting stitches just within the seam allowance, just to help hold everything in place and to make sure you've not caught anything in the wrong place. Okay, so that's that pinned there. Just put an extra one in there just to make sure. Okay, and then the same on this side as well. Okay, so that is now all pinned. Now what you want to sew along is exactly the same seam line as you've already got here. Now the observant of you will notice I've pinned it on the wrong side, but I find it easier to pin from that side first and then repin from the other side. So I'll just do that and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've sewed the seam and I've already cut it down. Apologies, I cut it down before I started recording again. So we've got everything wrapped up inside. We've sewed the seams on either side now, so we've got the two right sides of the yokes sewn together. So now we are ready to pull the fabric through, and everything should all be contained inside. So pull out that side like so. So there we go, we've pulled everything through. Sorry, I'm having a few video problems at the moment. So I've pulled the pieces out. So we have the back, we have the yoke, and we have the two front pieces. These are all the right sides, and then on, to show you the other side, on the inside, we have the right side of the inside yoke to the wrong sides, and as you can see, all those seams are now enclosed. So just to finish off this step, we just need to iron that, just tidy it all up, and that is then steps 1 to 4 on the pattern completed. One thing I'll just quickly add, if you do still want to put the top stitching on, just to give it a little bit more embellishment, you could still do that now after doing the burrito method. You just need to sew your top stitching to the yoke panel just next to the seam line. So if you wanted to, you could do some top stitching here, obviously on the other side, here, and if you wanted to, you could do it on the back as well. I'm not going to do it on this because I think it's fine as it is, but if you wanted to still have that embellishment, then you can do that.